Many years ago, there was a radio commentator in New York whose name was Bob Grant. Bob Grant was an Italian who said it the way it was. And he didn't pick any punches. If he thought you did something he didn't like, he criticized you. It didn't matter who you were, friend or foe. But he was actually an Oyev Yisroel. He really was an Oyev Yisroel. And he was a conservative. In other words, to a considerable degree, his values were preferred by us, if you will. And I remember once on the radio, he went on this whole rant. What was the rant? That he read in the newspaper that in Israel, on Pesach, they feed the chimpanzees matzah. On Pesach, the zoos, it's Eretz Yisrael, and everything officially at least has to be according to halacha. And chometz is asur b'hanos. They were feeding the chimpanzees matzah on Pesach. And he was so upset about it. He was like, the point he was making was that this is extreme, that this is too much. You know, how far you're going to go. I remember hearing him going on and on and on and on about it. And you wonder, what is it that bothers him so much? What's the big deal? So what if you're giving chimpanzees matzah? And of course, the issue that he had, is that Yiddishkeit, I don't like to use the word religion, so I won't use the word religion. Yiddishkeit speaks to such important things, such lofty things, such serious things, such cosmic things. Why we're being so petty? That's sort of the issue. Why does it have to come down to feeding chimpanzees matzah? Aren't there more important things for Yiddishkeit to worry about? And of course, any person who's learned Chassidus can answer this question. And the answer in one thought is, if there is a part of the world where Yiddishkeit does not reach, that means there is a part of the world where Hashem is not a balabayas. The idea that Yiddishkeit is involved in bigger things or more important things, and not involved in what is arguably less important things and more peripheral things, less important things, says in effect that Hashem does not extend all the way until there. In other words, it's like the story I've told you so many times about the Baal Shem Tov seeing the Elokei HaKadosh in a dream or in a vision and not seeing the bottom of his feet, and the Elokei HaKadosh saying that since he didn't see the bottom of his feet, that must prove that they're never going to meet an Elam Hazeh. In other words, the point is that the credibility of Yiddishkeit is not so much in the big things. The credibility of Yiddishkeit is not so much in the lofty things. The credibility of Yiddishkeit is the idea that Yiddishkeit reaches everywhere and everything. That Torah and mitzvahs exist on every level until the lowest level doesn't only prove that Torah and mitzvahs rules the lowest level. It proves that Torah and mitzvahs is emes. Because emes has to be everywhere. Emes has to be on all levels. And when it comes down to the physical level, that gives credibility to it. Or to say it in other words, let me give it to you from a different angle, from a different perspective. A human being has a lot of levels or layers in his life, including the material level, the material layer, the physical things that he's involved with. Besides, for the emotional ideas, emotional things and intellectual things and spiritual things and so forth. The idea that Hashem is involved in the physical aspects of a person's physical life, which on the one hand seems so trivial. If you think about it, it bothers the person. You give God your mind, give God your heart, give God your soul, but leave my body alone, leave my wallet alone, leave my home alone, leave my private life alone, or whatever the case may be. And of course the point is, it's only when you give Hashem the parts of yourself that you're least likely to give Him is here balabayas. To give Hashem your mind is wonderful, to give Hashem your heart and your soul is wonderful, but to give Hashem your money and your body, all the way down to the minutia, and arguably you say or you feel that it seems petty and it seems, why is he involved in such small things? And of course the point is, he's not involved in such small things. He's involved in you all the way till the small things. And faket, often people are very irritated and disturbed by the fact that Hashem is involved in those small things, and that's the whole point. That Yiddishkeit reaches all the way down to the physical level, to the material level. So the fact that on Pesach you have to feed a chimpanzee matzah, you can say it in a number of ways, shows that Elokus reaches everywhere. In other words, it shows that even the parts of yourself that you feel like God should not waste His time with, He wastes His time. He's busy even with those things as well. Why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this in light of the conversation that we had last time. In our most recent class, we talked about the concept of oisius, of letters and words. And one of the insights that was applied to the understanding of letters and words was the idea of a merkava. They carry. You cannot communicate intellectual ideas without using words. You cannot communicate anything without using words. So words carry. Words are conductors of ideas. Words are conductors of feelings. Words are conductors of all kinds of methods of communication. And as the Maamar said it, oisius is from the word also, which means to come or to bring. There are oisius which bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the oisius which bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu closer to us. So when a person says an idea and uses words, what's the priority? The priority, of course, is on the idea that he's sharing, or the feeling that he's communicating, or the sensitivity that he's imparting. The words are simply conductors. The oisius, the words and the letters, are simply carrying something much more meaningful, something more sublime, something more lofty, and so forth and so on. But Chassidishe says it's not the case. It's true that words and letters carry ideas and feelings and senses and so on. But there's another aspect, and that is the aspect that the words are the lowest level. And the idea that the words are also involved in this communication underscores that even the words, the lowest level, are also being given to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, also being involved in Avodas Hashem. So the necessity for words and letters, to communicate ideas. And of course the concept is that words are daimimim, they're like avonim, they're like stones. Just like stones are building blocks for a home. And of course the important thing about a home is the person who lives there, and the design of the home, and the warmth of the home, and so forth. So the stone seems to be only a means to an end. But Even Masu Haboinim Hoysel Roish Pina, the stone itself, which is the very, very lowest thing, it's inanimate, it's a daimim, it's a silent one, it has no more meaningful definition other than the fact that it exists, is the ultimate illustration, the ultimate expression of the mastery of HaKadosh Baruch Hu over His world, that it comes all the way until the level of a daimim. So even though, or in addition to the fact that the words that we speak to communicate ideas and feelings are carrying things of greater meaning, the very use of the words is the ultimate meaning. The idea that a stone, which is a physical illustration, for the idea of oisius is also in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, demonstrates that the Eibishter reaches all the way until the level of the avonim, until the level of the oisius. That Hashem is involved, Hashem is a balabayas. It's within His sphere, even the lowest level, the most lifeless of levels. And now we're going to move on to another idea. And that is that there's two types of stones. In other words, once we establish the basic concept that oisius, that letters, which are in the mashal like avonim, like stones, inanimate stones that are used to build meaningful structures, and the stones themselves are insignificant, and the meaning of the structure that they contribute to is far more important. But that's the significance in the stone itself. And the nimshal is a person uses words to communicate ideas, but there's significance in the words themselves. In letters and words themselves, there's two levels. And in the mashal, it's natural rock, natural stone that the Eibishter created, and man-made rock, which is bricks, levanim. But for this, I need to give you another introduction. I want to share with you another idea. In Chassidus, there's a discussion which revolves around the terminologies tselem and demus. In Bereshis, we read that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is creating man, Adam Arishin, and he says to the Malachim, Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu. Let us make man in our tselem and our demus, in our form and our likeness and our image. And of course, these two words, tselem and demus, are analyzed by all of the commentaries, beginning with Rashi. Everybody wants to know what tselem and demus means. And there are contradictions in the interpretations, whether tselem is higher or demus is higher, and so on. According to Chassidus, tselem is a higher level and demus is a lower level. What's the difference between tselem and demus? Tselem is called in Chassidus tzura atzmis, and demus is called in Chassidus tzura mitzura. In other words, tselem means an image, a form, that's a reflection of the one who is formulating it on a level of etzem. Etzem means it's exactly how the idea exists in the one doing the formulating. Demus is tzura mitzura. You already have an image, and now you're giving a second image to the first image. How would I explain this to you? I'll give you a very, very simple illustration. An idea emerges from somebody's subconscious to their consciousness. Something comes out of their neshama, and it enters into the mind of the human being. An inspiration, an enlightenment. That inspiration, that emerges from the person's subconscious and the person's consciousness. Now, of course, it depends on the person, it depends on how they live, it depends how prepared they are, it depends on all kinds of other conditions. Frequently is junk. It's not very helpful, not very useful. But it happens on occasion, and of course in a bigger person it happens far more frequently. This inspiration which emerges from the subconscious to the consciousness is very substantive and very useful and needs to be analyzed, needs to be visited. So imagine a human being who gets this incredible inspiration from his subconscious to his consciousness that gives him a certain insight. So he studies that insight as his subconscious inspired him, as the idea emerged from his subconscious to his consciousness. And he tries to understand it, he tries to formulate it, tries to organize it, tries to slow it down, as it were, to departmentalize it, and so on. Then he has to repeat it to somebody else. Often, when he repeats it to somebody else, he does not repeat it to another the way he was inspired. The initial inspiration that emerged from his subconscious to his consciousness is too raw, is too abstract, is too personal to share with another. So he creates another form, another way of saying the same idea. So his neshama gave him an inspiration. The inspiration had a certain form. The inspiration came to him using certain language, certain visuals, or certain words. And when he repeats it to somebody else, he's not able to repeat it as he was inspired. He repeats it to somebody else using other form because he believes that the alternative form, the second form, represents the idea in a clearer way. So Chassidus would say this, the form that the inspiration had as it emerged from his subconsciousness to his consciousness is called tselem, tzura atzmis. It's an image which is a reflection of that person's etzem. And the second form that he's going to use to communicate it to somebody else would be called demus. Tzura mitzura. He's superimposing a form on a pre-existing form. He has a form with which he was inspired, and he's giving a secondary form to the first form to communicate it with somebody else. And Chassidus would argue that in this translation, in this adaptation, from the first form, which is called the Tzura Atzmis, to the second form, which is called Tzura Mitzura, an enormous amount of subtlety and nuance is lost. When your subconscious inspires your consciousness with a certain idea or feeling or sensual expression that's rich, it's reflecting your essence. And for lack of words, it's reflecting your personality. In other words, it carries with it, besides for the significance and the meaning of the inspiration, it carries with it a subtlety, it carries with it a nuance that's ultimately like the essence. It's coming from your subconscious, so it has within itself a certain richness, a certain sensitivity that's in a way like infinite. And when you repeat it in different words, so you're repeating the form, you're repeating the part of it that you're able to manage, that you're able to adapt, that you're able to organize, that you're able to departmentalize. But the aspects of it that are too subtle, that are too close to etzem, are completely lost in the retranslation and the reformation of that idea to say it in different words, which is what dmus is. I've had the following experience both as a student and as a teacher. Very frequently, when a teacher and a student discuss ideas, especially esoteric ideas, abstract ideas, philosophical ideas, metaphysical ideas, the student will say to the teacher, in other words, the teacher has a thought, the teacher has an idea, and the student is trying to wrap his mind around it. And in attempting to wrap his mind around it, the student says to the teacher, in andere Werte, in other words, what you mean to say is this. And often, the teacher will respond in a very ungenerous way. If you've ever been young and been intellectually motivated and tried very, very hard to understand philosophical ideas, and when you're young and you're trying to understand ideas, it's very difficult. You're still in the process of developing the mind. You're not yet what they call proficient or an expert and so forth. And you hear an idea, and it's very important for you to get it. So you put it in a language and in a form which works for you. And the teacher will give you this, well, more or less. I once had a teacher tell me, for you it's good enough, which was the ultimate insult. And the student feels so slighted. The student feels that the teacher is being so insensitive. Here you are, sharing ideas. I'm taking the time and effort to try and understand them. I'm giving it back to you in my own words to clarify my own mind. Why do I have to get equivocal responses? Why can't you say wonderful, brilliant, exact, precise, rather than say, well, it's approximately, and so on. And of course the answer is because when the teacher communicates an idea, there's a lot of subtlety. There's what he's telling the student, and that's what he's not telling the student, but he's inferring. And when the student rephrases it, he's shaving off, he's sanding away those little edges that he has not yet become sensitive enough to even notice. In other words, the student doesn't even realize what he's doing to the teacher's idea when he says it in other words. To him, it's exactly the same thing. Because the nuance, the subtlety hasn't reached him yet, because he's a student. Which is why he's so frustrated when the teacher equivocates and can't tell him unequivocally, clearly, explicitly, your language is as good as my language, because it's not. Because words are a very poor conductor of ideas. Words are a very poor conductor of ideas. There's so much Chassidus about how deficient words are in carrying and communicating ideas. So they have to be very carefully chosen. And frequently there's innuendo, there's subtlety, there's nuance. And an intellectual, like an artist, knows how to use the words in a way that carry that subtlety, carry that innuendo. When you say it in other words, all of that is lost. And that's the difference between Tzelem and Dmus. Between saying something in a form which is a Tzura Atzmis, which is a form that's a reflection of Etzem, and a Tzura Mitzura, which is a form, which is a translation, which is a reformation of the first form. That it loses the Etzem quality. And this is the discussion we're about to have. As I told you earlier, we're going to be discussing stones, avonim. And the reason we're going to be discussing avonim is because the Maamar is pointing out that even though the lowest level is words, avonim, and they're conductors, they carry ideas, the truth of the matter is, in a certain aspect, the greatest thing that exists in the words carrying ideas are the avonim themselves, are the words themselves. The greatest thing about building a home is the stones themselves. They're the lowest level. They're in and of themselves of the least significance. And the whole idea is that the stone also is in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there's two types of stone. There's the stones that the Eibishter made, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made, and then there's stones that man makes, levanim, bricks. And the difference between the two is similar to the difference between Tzura Atzmis, which is Tselem, and Tzura Mitzura, which is Dumus. So let's begin learning on line 214. And soon I'll, so to speak, tie my introduction into this Maamar. Says the Elokei Rebbe Pikala now that we discussed oisies, letters, and in the Nimshal or in the Mashal, it's avonim, stones. And we point out that the letters and the stones, although they're carrying and conducting something much more meaningful, are really in and of themselves the meaning that godliness is being brought to them as well. We can now come to explain the pasuk that it says by the account of Aseres Hadibris and Matan Torah that Vayireu Elokei Yisroel, they saw the God of Israel, V'tachas Ragel underneath his feet was Kemaisa Livnas Asapir V'gemer, like the likeness of Livnas Asapir. Now, of course, Livnas Asapir has many translations. The one that's going to be relevant to us is bricks of sapphire. Continues the Rebbe on line 215. We know that letters are called stones. And on the one hand, letters simply carry ideas. On the one hand, stones simply contribute to meaningful structures. On the other hand, the letters themselves and the stones themselves are the point and the purpose. Says the Rebbe on line 216, there's two types of stone. The first is stone which the Eibishter made, rock, the creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the second is ha'even hanase b'dei adam, stones made by man, v'hi alaveinu, which is bricks. Shenasis min ha'ofar ha'idei b'nei adam, it's made from earth, from clay, from cement, through man. Shenasis gamkin chazoko v'kosh, it also is made strong and hard. V'hi nikra gamkin even, it's also called in the Torah like rock, like stone, was the pasuk says in Parshas Neach, in the story of the Tower of Babel. Let us form bricks, and use an oven to bake and to harden these bricks. And the pasuk concludes, they use brick instead of stone. Right in Eretz Yisrael, there's plenty of rock. It's mountains. It's mountainous. But in other places in the world, the terrain is very flat. And there is no rock. There are no mountains. So they had to use mud brick. They had to make bricks from clay in order to be able to build. Okay, as it is well known, that even man-made stone, which is bricks, yivnu binyan bayis, you can make a home and a wall, as you would from natural stone, from natural rock. But there's a precondition. It requires the preparation to make from these bricks, they should be strong and enduring and lasting. You can't just take the mud and mix it with other solutions you mix it with and then dry it. That would make it hard but brittle. If you want to make it hard and tough, it's has to be burnt in a fire. It's baked. And the baking at a very, very high temperature makes it into the equivalent of a rock. Like it says in the pasuk mentioned earlier, you make the bricks and you burn them. Only after the fire is employed, the brick becomes the equivalent of rock. V'hi ha'evan anasi b'dei adam, which is the concept of rock or brick, which is man-made. But it's leiv v'yetzim tel deizim k'avayavan mamish. It's not the same as rock, which God Almighty designs as part of His creation. Shein b'riyah b'dei shamayim, which are made by Elokus, but rather this rock is made by man. Now, of course, in the mashal, whether you're using natural rock or you're using brick, artificial rock, is not that big a difference. Because the point is that they're going to make from it a home, a structure. But on the nimshal, it becomes very, very important. And perhaps in the mashal, it's important as well. What's going to be the nimshal? Line 227, the analogy that we draw from the two types of stones, can be understood in metaphysical terms and spiritual terms. That the parallel for stones in metaphysical terms are words. And not even words, letters, sounds. We use sounds, letters, to join together to make words, and we use words to join together to make sentences, and we use sentences to join together to make paragraphs, and so forth and so on, to communicate ideas. And of course, the point of this Maamar is to say that these letters or stones that are communicating ideas on one level are the supporting cast, are servicing the ideas that they're sharing on another level. The point is the letters and the words. And in letters and words themselves, there's two levels. The first type of letters is created from heaven, which is natural rock or stone. The second is letters that are created by man, which is the metaphysical equivalent of brick, of man-made stone. And what's the difference? The difference is words in Lashon HaKodesh, and the holy language, and words in foreign languages. There's something called Lashon Torah. The Torah was given in Lashon HaKodesh, right? There's the famous Ramban about why Hebrew was called Lashon HaKodesh. I think it's in Parshas Kisisa, where he explains that the holy language is a language with which the Eibishter created the world. He disagrees with the Rambam. I guess I should share this. The Rambam, I think it's on the Pasuk Shekel HaKodesh, in the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, the Ramban brings the Rambam. It's one of those cases where he's especially tough on the Rambam. The Rambam asks, why is Hebrew called the holy language, Lashon HaKodesh? And he says it's called the holy language because there's no profane words. It doesn't have form to represent profanity, dirty things, and also to represent lowly things. Its language is very refined. And the Ramban is disturbed by this, and he goes on to say that Lashon HaKodesh may be a fine language without any profanity and so forth, but Lashon HaKodesh is much, much more than a pure language, than a refined language. Lashon HaKodesh is Eisiyes Shebehem Nivru Shamayim V'Aretz. It's the letters with which the Eibishter creates the world, and it's the letters through which Hashem communicates His ideas. Lashon HaKodesh is a vehicle, is a conduit for Torah. And if Lashon HaKodesh is a vehicle and a conduit for Torah, it's a vehicle and a conduit for Ein Seif, because Torah is Ein Seif. But only if it's in the original. When you translate the Lashon HaKodesh into another language, you can't even say a lot that's lost in translation. You can only say you have no idea how much you lost in translation. The question, how much is retained, which is a very, very small amount, of course. And that's the Rebbe's point. V'hainu, this means the letters of the Torah, which are of course in Lashon HaKodesh. Heim nikroi mavanim, they're called rock, natural stone. Shateirim in Ashmaim, Torah comes from heaven. V'edaber Hashem el Moshe, and it comes straight from the Eibishter to Moshe Rabbeinu. Nuvu Lashon HaKodesh, it's the holy language. In other words, this is the equivalent of the concept of tzelem, tzura atzmius, letters and words that express the will and the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that's etzem, that it's conducting, that it's carrying the intent and the spirit of Atzmos Hussein Tzav Baruch Hu in a precise way. And the reason we call it Lashon HaKodesh, says the Rabbi, the letters themselves are coming from supernal holiness, which is Chochmah. What would be the metaphysical equivalent of brick? Eisiyas shel ayin lashon, the letter in the 70 languages, milashenes ha'umes, from the languages of the other nations, asher kol am va'am medaber kilashene, that all the languages speak in their own tongue. So you cannot compare Lashon HaKodesh to other languages. And of course, if you learned any Chassidus, you know that when it comes to Lashon HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe brings in Sharichas Emunah. And the Rebbe so often repeats it that these letters are the letters with which the Eibishter created the world. Shema shenikru leibish lashon hakodesh. Each creation has a Hebrew name. And the Hebrew name of each creation is actually the energy of that creation. While a name of a creation in a foreign language is called mush'ali. It's simply a vehicle for identity. It allows you to know what it is, but it has no spiritual, no intimate connection to the thing itself. So there's an incredible difference between saying something in Lashon HaKodesh and saying something in Sfas Laz. In Lashon HaKodesh, you're carrying the Ein Seif. In Lashon HaKodesh, the letters that you're speaking and the idea they're representing are one and the same. Surah Atzmis. And saying it in a foreign language diminishes it incredibly. Nevertheless, Afal Pikein, even though it's true that Lashon HaKodesh is the perfect conductor of the will and wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no other language can suffice. There is a concept of speaking Torah in other languages. Right? Where does it begin? Where does the idea of speaking Torah in other languages begin? So first of all, in the Chumash itself, you have several words in Aramaic, Yagar Sahadusa. Second of all, it says in Chumash that Moshe Rabbeinu translated the Torah into all the different languages. Third of all, you have in Tanakh whole chapters that are written in Aramaic. And then after that, you have entire sections of Safrut Toranit, of Sfarim, of Torah that are written originally in other languages. In Aramaic, and in Arabic, and in Ladino, and of course now it's Yiddish, and now English, and so on. And of course we know from our Rabbeim that there was a significance of translating Torah into different languages. The Rebbe says in Igeres HaKodesh that the Baal Shem Tov and Gedet spoke B'loshen Yiddish Dafke in Yiddish. And Yiddish is considered in between other languages and Lashon HaKodesh. It's called a Yiddish Golus Sprach. It's a language of the Jewish people in the exile. So it's not Lashon HaKodesh, which is the Tzura Atzmis. But on the other hand, it's been halified by Jewish use and in Jewish things and so forth. And of course we know that the Rebbe would often say that one of the benefits of Yud Beis Tammuz, when you know that when you squeeze an olive, you get out its oil. When a Rebbe is squeezed, he gives out new dimensions. One of the new areas of Hafatas HaMayones Chutza that happened because the previous Rebbe went to jail and was released was the idea of translating Chassidus into many languages, into German and into French and into English and into Italian and into Portuguese and into Arabic and so forth and so on. So the question becomes, if in translation you lose so much, what's the point of the translation? Now the simple answer is because you want people who don't speak Hebrew to understand it. But if you're translating something from Lashon HaKodesh into a foreign language, then someone that doesn't understand Lashon HaKodesh should be able to understand it as well. There is no innate value in the translation. The value is only in what the translation provides. So this Maamar says that that's not the case. That when you translate an Inyan from Torah, into from Lashon HaKodesh into a Sfas Laz, obviously what you're trying to do is bring the Torah to someone who doesn't speak Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh. But in addition, you're actually elevating the brick. Just like when you speak ideas of Torah in Lashon HaKodesh, it's not only that the Hebrew words carry the ideas, but that there's meaning, there's significance, there's holiness in the letters themselves, which are also being uplifted. The same is true when Torah is translated in other languages, in spite of the fact that so much is lost in the translation. 235, inside. V'hine. Ksiv, the Pasuk says, Ke'arbe ruches hashamayim perasti yeshcha. God Almighty has scattered us to the four corners of the earth. Tahainu, in other words, She Yisroel mefuzarim ba'ayin umis. The Jewish people are scattered among 70 nations. Umedabrim gamkein kleshein am va'am. They speak the languages of the nations where they settle. Sheim darim b'teichem, that they live amongst, at least b'chol tzorchei masomat. At least when it comes to their parochial activities, when it comes to their business, and when it comes to their worldly affairs, they speak the language of the country in which they find themselves. Like, for example, in America, people speak English. Later on, these Yidden daven. B'mesiras nefesh, with great sacrifice, b'kavana. They learn Torah for the sake of the Torah, using what they acquired through their business, through their work. In other words, the energy for their davening and the learning comes from their worldly activities. Says the Rebbe Azai, under those conditions, Mailim, they uplift. Kol tzirufei eisiyeth shedibru bahem, the formations, the words and the sentences and the paragraphs that they accrued, that they coalesced from original sounds, original letters, to speak in some foreign language to explain an idea of Yiddishkeit. And when they use the energy that they get from their involvement in the world, which involves foreign languages, and their davening and their learning, they're elevating the language itself. L'mayla, higher and higher, l'sheidish nishmasim, to the root of their neshama, she bechinas teherahi, which is tehiru ilah, shalefnei ha'ishtalshos. Vezehu hanikra, this phenomena of translating Torah into different languages and speaking, let me say it differently, of living your life in a foreign land and using the language of that land, like for example English or French or Spanish and so on, for your regular life, and then being a Yid in that environment. So since you draw energy from your material life to daven and to learn, so in your davening and learning, you're elevating your material life, including the language that you use to communicate the acquisition of the material things, and so on. It's chulin, it's ordinary things. To use a different form, the kinds of things that Yidden Lahavlan Goyim are the same, they all do them the same, but you're using them in a pure and a holy way, because you're a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So all the involvement in materialism that you have in your life ultimately comes to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. And therefore it uplifts not only the material things you're using in His service, but the words you used in discussing the acquisition of those material things. Pirush, Kilash and Kedesh, the holy tongue, Nim, Chachmachinas Kedesh Elyon, comes from Chochmah Vatzilas, comes from a holy source. Masha'enkin, Shar L'Sheines Hem Chayil, other languages are Chayil. And the translation of the word Chayil is ordinary. Chayil isn't bad. Chayil is plain. That's what the word Chayil means. Ordinary. Bad would be Tumah. Chayil just means plain. Ordinary. I often, when I want to make this point, I use this example. In Russian, there's a word called prosta. It's a word, prosta. Prosta means plain. In Yiddish is the word prost. But the Yiddish word prost has a connotation of deficiency, of being vulgar or unrefined. The word prosta in Russian means no charge, no energy, plain, simple. It literally means like vanilla, no flavor. Prost, simple, plain. That's what the word choil means. Choil doesn't mean good, it doesn't mean bad, it means plain, ordinary. Aval kishem izbadadim. When you indirectly or directly elevate the use of that language, al yedei atfila kanal, through your davening and through your learning, harehim nasim al taras hakedesh, so those words spoken in a foreign language, whose source is whatever, also become incorporated into purity and holiness, bechinas kedesh ha'elyon tehiru ilah, supernal holiness, which is chachma vatzilos, and tehiru ilah, which is even higher than that. In other words, you're taking something which is not naturally from a godly place and godlifying it. So you still can't compare it to Lashon HaKodesh, because Hebrew Lashon HaKodesh is natural to Kedusha. That's its realm. It's a tzura atzmis. Lashon HaKodesh and holiness are a hand and a glove. Other languages and Kedusha are not natural. Fakert, other languages are chayil, are ordinary. Using them in Avodas Hashem brings them into the realms of Kedusha and Tahara as well. But as a foreigner, as an alien, they're not naturally Kodesh and Tahir, but because of the way a person uses them, they become Kodesh and Tahir as well. It's exactly like the metaphor of bricks. Shehagam shehem offer pasha, they're made from plain earth, sand, clay. Makom at the same time. Ayadei, ma'isei yadei adam, the work of a person. Nasim gamkein koshem v'chazaka, they become hard and tough. Bebechinas even kanal, like as if they were stone. In other words, they become strong enough to withstand the elements, and they don't break, and they don't crack, and so on. You make a wall out of them, and of course, in the nimshal v'anicheim azu teira. There's a meta, the pasuk in Tanakh, which describes Torah as a wall which protects. And just as Torah, spoken in Lashon HaKodesh, is a shmira, Torah spoken in foreign languages is a shmira as well. V'yamnam, but there's a precondition. There's a precondition. To take something which is naturally not holy. It's chayil. It's not a tzura atzmis, it's a tzura mitzura. You're speaking ideas of Torah in other words. You're speaking ideas of Torah in a foreign language. And those other words and that foreign language are not natural conductors of chokhmah and ratzon of Ein Sof, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because they're foreign. And nevertheless, you have to use that foreign language because of whatever reasons. Says the Rebbe, Hine, I efshe she is hapchu v'yizbareru hatzirufa yeisius. There's no way to take the letters and the formations of letters, which is the words, and the formations of words, which is the sentences, and make them holy. Hana liest avnei kedesh, liest nikraim avnei kedesh. That it should also be considered the equivalent of holy rock, unless you have fire. And what is the fire? I'm on line 249 in the middle. Then when you say krishma, there's fire. The dikmei mashal alaveinim, just like the metaphor of the bricks. The tzorech sheyisru veisan bekifshan tchila kanal has to first be burnt in a fire. Vayidei yasrei, only when you use incredible heat. Yizhabchu liyis kosher v'chazak kavon, and they become hard and tough like stone. And if you don't put them into the oven, they may be hard, but they'll be brittle. They're not going to have any toughness. There's the slightest change of weather, the slightest whatever it is, and they come apart. And the heat preserves them. The heat guarantees they have this toughness and this hardness. Says the Rebbe, the same is true in spiritual terms. Inyan sreifas halaveinim, the notion of burning these grips of these bricks, of hardening these bricks, requires fire. When one davens with a proper intent, with fire of avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, by loving the Eibush with your whole heart, and so forth. Says the Rebbe, this is what takes a language, words and letters and sounds, which are naturally chayil, prost, ordinary, unholy, and makes them a vehicle for elokus, that they also become part of kedusha, and they also become part of tahara. I'm reminded of the story with the Tzemach Tzedek, which is famous, which is brought in the Siches, which everybody knows, that the Tzemach Tzedek was a boy, and we all know that he was an orphan, and that the Alter Rebbe had adopted him. Alter Rebbe was raising him. And the Alter Rebbe had a seder that on Friday night he would teach Biyurei Azeh. The Alter Rebbe had a seder, I guess after Sudas Shabbos, he would teach a shir on Zeir, Biyurei Azeh, which of course is later printed in the Maamar of the Alter Rebbe in the Biyurei Azeh and so on. Tzemach Tzedek was about 8 or 9. And he wanted to join the shir. Tzemach Tzedek was an extraordinary mind, of course. And he was very interested in hearing what the Alter Rebbe had to say. And the Alter Rebbe told him that he'll be able to join the shir when he's a little bit older. So that Tzemach Tzedek did the next best thing. It was the house was heated by a furnace, by an oven, and of course the oven was in the center of 4 rooms. Imagine you have 4 rooms that are adjacent to each other. So if you put a hearth in the middle, you can simultaneously warm several rooms at the same time. You could put the heat in from one side, and there's grates on both sides or on 3 sides, and you could warm various rooms at the same time with the same fire. So he went into another room, he opened up the grate, and he crept across from one side of the oven to the opposite side of the oven, and he was sitting inside this grate right behind the Alter Rebbe's chair, and Alter Rebbe was teaching Chassidus. And it got chilly, so the guy was brought in to warm up the home, and he tried to push the logs into the hearth, into the oven, and they weren't going. So instead of examining what was the obstruction, he left them right there by the entrance. He put the logs down. He lit some leaves and some twigs to make a fire, which would make a bigger fire. And then, of course, after a few minutes, this entire fire came flying out of the oven because the Tzemach Tzedek was suffocating. And the fire went flying all over the ground. And they looked inside the oven, and the Tzemach Tzedek had fainted. He was out cold. They pulled the little boy out of the oven, and it became a big commotion, a lot of hysteria. The boy's grandmother, the Rebbetzin Stedner, the Alter Rebbe's Rebbetzin, Alter Rebbe's wife, became very upset When Alter Rebbe walked into the room, she started to shout at him, "Ot, es ist schier nicht getroffen an Unglück." We almost had a tragedy. She screamed at him, and she said he wants to learn Chassidus, and because you wouldn't let him in, we almost had a tragedy. So of course the Alter Rebbe gave him a bracha for Yichas Yomim Muftachani Avet Meirach Yomim Zayin, and the Alter Rebbe said with dveikus and with a nigun kedake b'kedesh that the Torah is gegeben geworden mit eish. The beginning of the Jewish experience is Moshe Rabbeinu in the burning bush, a fire burning a bush. Torah was given from fire to teach us that the acquisition of Torah requires Mesiras Nefesh. And the Alter Rebbe said this act of this little boy was his Mesiras Nefesh, which is going to make him a proper keli to receive the Torah. And then the Alter Rebbe said, Muftachani, I trust he's going to have Arichas Yomim, and so on. But the point is, for the Torah to hold, it's not enough that you have to have a great mind, you have to have fire. The fire doesn't change it. When you have a brick that you've molded and dried, it looks exactly the same before you bake it and after you bake it. But the baking it toughens it. It makes it into a new entity. It's not just granules of sand stuck together by liquid. It becomes by a fluid, by a mixture. It becomes one piece in the baking process. Says the Rebbe, this is what happens when you daven. When you daven and you use fire, passion, the worldly part of yourself is elevated, and one of the aspects of the worldly part of yourself which is elevated in your davening are the words you say in another language which help you earn a living and help you earn the energy and the material that you need to be able to daven later. But then he adds one more thing, that in addition to the fire of davening, hardening these artificial stones, so to speak, these man-made rocks, and making them into Tara and Kedusha, there's another aspect, and that is 254. It burns up the foreign letters, Mikola Maso Matan, from all of his business affairs. Gam Kol Achayis V'Shefa Shenasam Hem, all the life and the flow which he receives from them becomes elevated. Kamei, for example, Maichal Lavush, the food that he's eaten and the clothing that he's worn, Hakel Elim V'Nechlolim Ba'achtos, Ba'avedes Havayah, they all become included in the unity of God and the service of God. Kishemeis Nafshe Be'echad Be'eslavos, when he serves Hashem with fire, but there's a condition. Ach, Tzorech, it must be Sha'esik B'Maso Matan Yeh B'Kridus. That is involvement in material things be cold. In other words, this fire burns the material involvements of this person and makes them holy. But part of that is not only taking the material involvements of this person and the words that this person speaks in a foreign language and makes them holy, but also has to take away passions for anything other than Avodas Hashem. It's brought in Chassidus in a lot of places, in the Sefer Orches Tzadikim, that the Orches Tzadikim say fire and water cannot cohabit. Everybody knows fire and water cannot be together. So the Orches Tzadikim says, just like fire and water cannot get along, Taivas Elokim and Taivas Zores cannot get along. An involvement in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and an involvement in materialism are equally in conflict. They can't cooperate, they can't exist together. Ubal Korchach, he has to feel like he's being coerced to be involved in these material things. Shalei b'tshuka mamash, without any thirst, without any enjoyment. It's as if he's being coerced to be involved in worldliness in order to be able to sustain himself. To give life to himself and to his family. They should be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All the days that their neshama is in a goof. As the Mishnah says, you have to make your Torah permanent, priority, primary, and your worldly involvements secondary. The whole point of being involved in the world, and in this case, speaking in another language, is that the Torah should be permanent, says the Rebbe V'Ozen. Only then, so the Rebbe is saying something a little bit different, slightly different, than the way I explained it to you. Because the way I explained it to you, it's a question of speaking Torah in one language or another. And that's also true, because the Rebbe talked about this so many times. that when you speak Torah in a foreign language is not a natural conductor in Yoni Torah. It's not a holy language. So when you have fire, the foreign language that speaks in Yoni Torah becomes part of Torah and Kiddush. Here he's saying something even more distant, that you're speaking words not of Torah, you're speaking words of business and commerce and productivity in material things. And then you use the worldly involvements in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In that case, even such words, such letters also become a part of purity and holiness and are elevated. Says the Rebbe on line 263, V'zehu tachas raglov, which explains the notion that tachas raglov underneath his feet was kamaisa livna sasaper v'gemer tachas raglov dafka. Now, I'm going to read these 15 lines. I'm going to translate them. Then I'm going to read the next page. The next shir, which will be the last shir on this Maamar, which is going to begin on line 307, we're going to go back to this idea that we're going to read now. So now I'm going to read this quickly. I'll explain it just a little bit. But it requires that I give you a little bit of an introduction. In other words, I'm going to explain this now very briefly. And the ariches on these few lines we're going to be discussing Mitzvah Hashem in the next shir. And that is the theme of this Maamar, if you remember from the beginning, was the concept of Yad and Regel. We're talking about the Merkava, Hashem's chariot, Alakus, Atzilus, and that the Eibush HaKvayachal has a hand and a foot. And we connected the Yad and the foot to Adam and Kisei. Atzilus itself, Adam Ha'elyon is the Madrega of Yad, where the godliness is more revealed and more natural. Remember the last couple of classes? And Kisei is a garment that covers over Adam Ha'elyon, which is the equivalent of a foot that also reveals the will of a person, but it's a less revealed way. It's less overt and obvious. So the Pasuk says that they saw Elokus, v'tachas raglav, underneath his feet. So the Rebbe explained this goes on the Neshamas. They cannot relate to Atzilus itself, but can only relate to the Merkava, to the Kisei, which covers over Atzilus. Those neshamas that could relate to the Yad Hashem are neshamas of Atzilus, higher neshamas. And those neshamas that can only relate to the Regel Hashem are lower neshamas. So the Rebbe ties in bricks to feet. V'zeh, and this is the pshat in the pasuk v'tachas raglav, underneath the feet of Adam Ha'elyon was kamaisa livnes hasapin, was the likeness of bricks of sapphire. Says the Alter Rebbe, tachas raglav dafka, those neshamas that relate only to Elokus through the Kisei. They can't relate to the Adam directly, only the Kisei, the chair, the throne, the seat, the concealer. And if they're relating to the Kisei, they know only the Raglayim of Elokus. And what's Tachas Raglov, they have a relationship to the concept of brick, of taking something which is naturally non-godly and transforming it into godly. We discussed in the first shiurim on this Maamar, the idea that there's Elokus. And there's Elokus even in the Madrega of Adam. And then there's the Elokus Madrega of Adam that sits down on a chair. Shesh bechinas kisei keis aleph. And the significance of sitting down on a chair is that it's a tzimtzum, it's a concealment over what Adam is by himself. Halmal b'shum machasa, that acts as a garment and a cover, a sheath. Le'er, over the light, tanim shech bechinas kamari Adam v'chulu, which comes from Ari Adam, which is Atzilus. Acha yuchal lihiyeh is the significance of this seat that covers over the Adam, allows for its havos hayesh, the creation of worlds that are independent in their own personal experience from Elokus, v'dava nifra, than something which is separate b'bya. Says the Rebbe, b'chinas is havos hayesh, the creation of a yesh, b'chinas tachas raglov. In Adam Ha'elyon there's achdus. The truth of the matter is, outside of Adam Ha'elyon there's also achdus, but on the lowest levels there's a possibility for the perception of yeshus and pirut. Ad hasorim v'chulu. Probably it means it's probably supposed to be ayin sorim, but you have to look up the original. That the Eibush extends until the ayin sorim, but it's a much more concealed, involved. Mashen kim bechinas yad, as opposed to the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'mayl bechinas kisei. It's the way Elokus is higher than the concealment of kisei, and therefore ve'ein sham bechinas yesh v'dav nifrat ivagamei echad. The yad is one with Elokus. Alkein Omar, which is why in this context we are describing the Neshamas seeing Elokus at Har Sinai. But what kind of Neshamas? Lower Neshamas, as you'll see in Mitzvah Hashem in the next shiur. So their perception of Elokus, that they see tachas raglov, what they're able to see is underneath the feet and underneath the kisei. Shulamatam b'chinas kisei anal, the underneath the kisei which covers over Adam ha'elyin. Shamu b'chinas livnas asapere, what they perceive as bricks of sapphire, not stone, not avanim b'dei shamayim, but avanim b'dei adam. In other words, the idea that you're dealing with tzura mitzura, you're living in a world where the forms that represent Elokus are covering over the natural forms, and they also must be made, uplifted, and included in godliness. Pirosh livnas, the meaning of the word levenas, me'inyan bechinas levenim, are not like bricks, which is of course what Rashi says. Rashi says, and we discussed it in the first class, that livnas asapir was a mashal for the hard work that Yidden did in Mitzrayim, b'chemiru b'levenim. Shehu, and what is it ultimately? Birur v'halo as ha'esias shel ha'ayin lashon, clarifying and uplifting the letters of all 70 languages that are being spoken in teaching Torah and learning Torah, that are being spoken in parochial activities, which in turn become uplifted because you then daven and learn what the keich get from them. Birur, once they're given clarity in bechinas livnas hasaper, they may be bricks, but they're sapphire. They're sapphire. Shemeidim kisapidim, they radiate like sapphire, like lichtigkeit, like light. The place where the stones are sapid, even though their levena, their man-made, is layoda energy beyond human comprehension or access. So the Rebbe explained the concept of levena, and the Rebbe linked it to Tachas Raglav. But these few lines of Tachas Raglav we're going to leave alone. Let's continue our discussion on levena. So we're going to go now to line 279. And to a great extent, what we're going to read now is going to be a repetition of what we read before, in other words. The short of it is that the point, the truth of godliness is that it comes everywhere, including to the lowest levels. So the stones and the letters that are carrying ideas and feelings and senses that are inspired by godliness are not only conductors, but they're the point, that these words should also be included in Avodas Hashem. And it extends even to words in a foreign language. But in order for the words in the foreign language to go from being chayil to being Kaddish and to be taught, you have to have fire. Says the Rebbe on line 279, to explain this to ourselves a little bit better. How can you explain that even words in a foreign language should be uplifted? When you daven and learn, as long as the davening and learning is with a fire, that they should also be like holy stones, they're called bricks of sapphire. And the Rebbe gives a very interesting answer. And what is the answer? And I guess the easiest way for me to do this is to give a little bit of an introduction. There used to be a program that you would hear about all the time called phonics, phonetics. The concept is that sentences are made up of words, and words are made up of sounds. The words are different in every language. The sentences are different in every language. But the sounds are the same. In other words, when you look at a book that's made up of chapters, and a chapter that's made up of paragraphs, and paragraphs that are made up of sentences, and sentences that are made up of words, and words that are made up of sounds, consonants, individual letters, in each language they're different. On every level, until the basic level. The sounds themselves are not unique to any language. You can say the same sound in many different languages. And that's how the Rebbe explains how you can elevate the words in a foreign language through this fire. The idea is as follows. It's true that every language is different. But at the same time, it comes down to the phonetics, to the sounds. And the sounds are international. Is an aleph in every language. B is a beis or a b in every language. Same is true with a gimel and a daled and so forth. And when you get to the very deepest level of a letter, to the most basic level of a letter, it's, so to speak, the the way those individual consonants, the way those individual sounds with their vowels are joined together into a word, this is where there's a divergence. And therefore, Shatzira of Basar, Shaloshan HaKedesh, for example, the three-letter word Basar, Beis Shin Resh, which is in Hebrew, meat, the ACSA Beis Shin Resh and Mechaya Mamish Es HaBasar, B'dvar Hashem B'sheshes Me'b'reshes. So we know from Tanya that these three letters, and Dafke in this order where the Beis is the Resh HaTeva and so on, gives life to meat from the Asara Mamaris of creation. While Masha'en came B'shara L'Shenis, in all other languages, Shemes Kemiim, the words and the sounds are only agreed to representations of things, but they don't have any energy, they don't give life to anything. Says the Rebbe V'chein, 289, Tumunas Asias Tiksava Shuri, the shape of the sound, the letters as they're written in the Assyrian Hebrew, which of course is the Asias of the Sefer Torah. Reimez Lenyonim Nifloim indicates wondrous things. Shai Rabbi Akiva Hidera shall call Kates. Rabbi Akiva learned things not just from the letters but from the crowns above them. And of course, v'kol ze eine klal, uklal b'shar k'sav l'shenis. Other languages don't have the idea that these words actually are energies of different creations. They don't have that the shape of these letters has all kinds of mystical significances. Says the Rebbe, im kol ze havadas chav beis yesh ben gam ken b'shav. The actual sounds, which are the very basic foundation of what the letters are and how the letters join together to make words, is the same in all languages. V'yadua, it's known, the Shadish Chav Beis Bechines Eisias Eilu. And if you learn Kabbalah and Chassidus, you learn that the letters themselves have a higher Shadish than the Tziruf. In other words, when you say a word, there's three levels. There's what the word means. There's the joining together of the various consonants, the various sounds to make that word. And then there's the individual sound of each individual letter. So when a person looks at it, the most meaningful thing is what the word means. The second most meaningful thing is the arrangement of the consonants, the arrangement of the sounds to make a word. And the least meaningful thing is the individual ois, the individual sound. But according to Kabbalah, it's actually the other way around. The sounds themselves come from Atzmus, the Keich HaTziruf comes from Kadmus HaChochma, and the meaning comes from Seichel. So the original sound, which are the basis, the building blocks of all letters and words and so on, has the highest source. V'yadua, it is known, the Shadish Chav Beis Bechines ACSL, these raw sounds, nimshachem mimokam gaveya me'et, come from the highest levels, ulamayla me'ashechos, altogether beyond intellect, rakshakov and bepevachol, they've been fixed to speak ideas that are reasonable or forms that come across as reasonable through the mouth. Im kain al kol ponim, says the Rebbe, when you look at a foreign language and you wonder, this language is called chayil, it's ordinary, it's plain. How by speaking in this language to earn money, which I later use to buy material, which I later use to give me energy, which is going to help me daven, how do you elevate that foreign language? The foreign language is meaningless. So the Alter Rebbe says, break down that foreign language into words and into sounds, and the sounds are international. The sounds are in every language the same, and therefore they can be made holy. Im kain al kol ponim on the rein, we see shagam ayin lashon. All languages, yeshedish laesias lamayla, can have a source on the highest of levels, because when you get down to the level of the sound, they're all equal. Lekach yuchlu lisalis, which is why they can be uplifted adei mesidus nevet b'kishma kanal, through fire. There's a lot of discussion in etymology where language comes from and where written language comes from. And there's a lot of indications that it comes back down to one original language. Of course, according to Torah, before the event of the day of Aflaga, all Bahiu Kala Aret Safa Achas Dvaram Achad, they all spoke Lashon HaKedesh. And the Eibush was Neval Hashem Sfas, and they began to speak different languages, and Liyuch, they shouldn't understand one another. And there is evidence that the first written language was a Semitic language, and maybe even the first spoken language was Hebrew. In other words, even scientists are beginning to see this, but Apiteta, that's how it is be'emes. That's the pshat, taking bricks and making them holy. Holy, Levinas Hapa means bricks of sapphire. Shutachas ragel underneath the feet of the Eibishter, but here it means birim bechinas nega. Not like we said before that the feet are very low level. that allows the yesh and dava nifrad, but rather the uplifting of what is yesh v'dava nifrad to be tachas raglov. V'shom, in other words, that the meaning of tachas raglov k'maisa livnas asapit isn't only that klipa gets chayes from kedusha through the raglayim, through the many tzimtzumim, but that klipa is uplifted into kedusha and it sits tachas raglov. And then it says v'yesham yesh gamkin ketzem hashmayim loteir. And he translates etzem hashmayim loteir shu bechinas eisias atera in lashon hakedesh. So tachas raglov, you have two things. Livnas asapit means how Torah is spoken in another language, how other languages become uplifted through avodas Hashem and through fire. And etzem hashmayim loteir means the same idea as lashon hakedesh itself, which is a tzura atzmis. Sha'atera miyashamayim data comes from heaven, ve'etzis and bechinas tiru law. The letters come from a very high level, like it says in the zer gol of gelifu b'tiru law. But v'nim shechol amata gamkin tachas ragla basiyaka. Now the letters of Hebrew, of lashon hakedesh, holy tongue, also descend to a very low madrege, and both of them are tachas ragla. V'nim to thus livnas as hapa ve'etzem hashmayim loteir. These two statements about the bricks of sapir and etzem hashmayim loteir is beis bechinas mini eisias, and now two types of letters. And the point, of course, is that these letters are not only conducting ideas, but the letters are being elevated themselves. Beis bechinas eisias, and all through these different types of letters is aliyas haneshamas acher yiridasan. It's an ascent of the neshamas after the yiridash yardu, they descend in bechinas teheirehi, from the level of teheirehi aliyas bechinas regel kanal to the level of regel. Vayidei beis bechinas eisias atera hanal. Through using these kinds of letters, that means lashon hakedesh letters, and other letters in our lives and in our avodas Hashem, shem bebechinas tachas raglov, there is this tachas raglov, ayedei hu aliyah. This is how they're brought back up into a lukus, and we'll continue this, and we'll explain this, and we will finish this b'li neder mitzvah Hashem next time.